scenario, I'm dreaming. Worst case scenario is... I'm in hell.
Not hell. Not yet. But for your entertainment, I thought I'd procure a few Terrors of the Library!
Welcome back to Terrors of the Library, where we look at some games that have been donated to my local library and left to rot. And today we've got some very special specimens to look at. Unless you were living under a rock during the years 2000, you've probably heard of Harry Potter. Story of a kid who discovers he's a wizard and discovers a world of magic, turned into a multi-billion-dollar series of movies. Fifth book kinda sucked in my opinion, all that jazz. And with a franchise as wildly popular as Harry Potter, it goes to follow there are Harry Potter video games, released to coincide with the release of each movie. I've only played one of the main games, Chamber of Secrets, and it's been forever since I played it, but I seem to remember it being pretty good. Adventure game with plenty of variety, puzzles, dungeons, stealth, a good variety of spells, flying, exploring Hogwarts. I've heard from the Peanut Gallery that all of the games in this series were good, the lone exception being Goblet of Fire, which apparently had a screwy top-down camera view. I just want everyone to stop and acknowledge the miracle that occurred here. Electronic Arts made a series of 6 movie-licensed games, and none of them were terrible! Up until the final installment, The Deathly Hallows. The finish line was in sight, and you didn't just trip, you tripped, fell, got a concussion, and then you threw up all over said finish line. Released in 2 parts just like the movie, Deathly Hallows was 2 crappy games for the price of, well, 2. The first 6 Harry Potter games were almost Zelda-esque adventure games. Deathly Hallows Part 1 and Part 2 are third-person shooters. Wrap your head around that phrase. Harry Potter, third-person shooters. Oh look, Bright Light, the same EA minions that made Create. Congratulations, you guys are quickly moving up my shit list. Alright, if you haven't read or watched the books, the series' big bad Voldemort has been building his forces ever since he came back to power in Movie Book 4. Voldemort has overthrown the Ministry of Magic and is in the process of taking over the world and waging a campaign of genocide against Muggles and Muggle-born wizards. Harry and friends are on the run and searching for Voldemort's Horcruxes, objects that contain pieces of his soul that could be used to resurrect him again. First problem that needs to be addressed, the controls suck ass! Every Wii shooter from Men in Black to Metroid has followed one golden rule. You can use the pointer to shoot at whatever's in your field of vision, but the camera only moves if you point it at the edge of the screen. Deathly Hallows doesn't do that. Every time you move the cursor, even if you're pointing it at the center of the screen, the camera moves. So every time you move the cursor to shoot at an enemy who's in plain sight, the camera moves along with the cursor, which usually leads to overshooting your target, and it's annoying and disorienting that every slight twitch of the cursor makes the camera jitter. If you don't hold the Wii remote perfectly still, the camera shakes constantly like it's got Parkinson's disease, and it never stops. About halfway through the first level, it occurred to me to break out my Wii Zapper, because when you think of games where you'll get to use a gun peripheral, your mind jumps to Harry freaking Potter, and the Zapper actually made the game significantly more playable because you can hold the remote much more steadily and keep the camera still, but that's only the beginning of this game's problems. As with all modern shooters, there's a cover system where you can walk up to a piece of scenery and take cover by pressing the minus button. Half of the time, it doesn't work. Luckily, you don't even need cover. Your health regenerates fairly quickly, and, at least on the normal difficulty because I'm not playing this crap heap more than once, you take damage really slowly. You'll kill the enemies long before they kill you, so as long as you're not standing still, the enemies pose very little threat to you. You pretty much need to fight enemies 3-on-1, and all 3 enemies have a continuous clear shot in order to ever get killed. Enemies spawn by apparating, aka teleporting, into the level. You'll never have any idea how close you are to the end of an encounter because the enemies keep spawning from literally nowhere. Trying to run further into the level because you thought the group was dead is pretty much the only other thing that will ever get you killed. The game doesn't put those little red indicators on the screen when you get shot, so you'll never know where you're getting shot from, and perplexingly for a game with such oversensitive controls, it takes forever to turn around, so being surrounded is just miserable, especially when the enemies are using Expelliarmus, and every hit knocks you flat on your ass. I don't even know why I was complaining about the aiming. You can hold the Z button to iron sight aim, zoom in on enemies, which the game says makes your spells more accurate. More accurate means that the game will lock onto and automatically shoot any enemy if you point in their general direction. Seriously, you point within 3 feet of someone and they automatically get shot. You barely have to aim! That's the bulk of the gameplay out the window right there, because all you have to do is hold the zoom button and everything you slightly point at dies. It doesn't take long for the game to become boring as hell. You just run through levels since you don't need cover, mashing the trigger button since you don't need to aim. There is no stimulation at all. Let's talk about the spells, which are basically your guns and your primary weapons. You start the game with Stupefy, the stunning spell. It fires a basic projectile and kills most things with a handful of hits. Then you get Impedimenta and later Expulso, which are both machine guns. Both of these spells do much less damage than Stupefy, which already fires pretty quickly, so you'll never use either of them. By the way, Expulso is supposed to blow up inanimate objects. The game doesn't represent it accurately at all, though I can picture what would happen if it did. Petrificus Totalis takes a full second to fire and immobilizes an enemy, but the game already locks onto enemies for you so you don't have to aim to land a hit. What do you need to waste time trying to paralyze enemies for? Confundo disorients an enemy so they stop shooting at you, but again, just shoot them. You don't need to aim, it's faster. In fact, using Confundo pretty much renders an enemy invincible temporarily, since the game does not register hits on enemies if they're moving! Expelliarmus is a charge beam that kills enemies in one hit, but it takes so long to charge between shots that you won't use it either. Confringo fires an explosive that takes a while to recharge, and I've never used it without getting knocked on my ass. The final spell is Wingardium Leviosa, the levitation spell, and I never got this spell to do shit. It did not work, do anything, one single time! I saw a hint on a loading screen saying it's used to levitate pieces of cover, which just sounds like way more trouble than it's worth since the game is already so piss easy and bare bones. So 8 spells to cycle between, and Stupefy is the only one you'll ever use. And I know this is how spells work in the main series, but it only takes about 10 minutes into the first level for you to get sick of Harry yelling Stupefy every couple of seconds.
Stupefy! 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 Stupefy!
You can hold the C button to cast Protego and give yourself a shield, but you can't move while Protego is active, and most of the time enemies have flanked around you so that they can still hit you. The damn thing is useless. You also use the C button to cast Expecto Patronum, which you need to fight off Dementors, but get a load of this retarded shit. You cast Expecto Patronum by pressing, releasing, and then pressing and holding the C button. Half the time when you try and cast Expecto Patronum, you just cast Protego instead, and trust me, this game is not so complex that they had absolutely no choice but to map 2 important spells to the same button. You can also press plus to cast 4 points, which makes a line appear on the ground pointing to your next objective, and the levels are laid out so poorly and everything looks the same that you're often reliant on this spell to figure out where the hell to go, but several levels are prone to glitching so that 4 points won't even cast, leaving you lost and screwed. The game also has 4 potions you can pick up. Exploding potions, aka grenades, garroting gas, aka more grenades, Peruvian instant darkness powder, aka flashbangs, and a pesticide for annoying fairies called doxes. I only used these a few times because they're damn near impossible to aim with any accuracy, and their blast radii are pathetic. There are also a lot of health potions that you will never need because your health grows back so quickly, and you can't pick up health potions to save them for when you need them. You're forced to use them on the spot, so they're worthless. The game has a leveling system, and I have no idea why, because according to the pause menu, I was at level 25 by the end of the game, but my health bar was the same length, and I'm pretty sure if I went back through the footage and counted, it'd take me the same number of hits to kill the same enemies at the start and end of the game. It's like the game was taking cues from Daikatana or something, because the AI is dumb as shit. Ron and Hermione just run straight out into enemy blasts, not even trying to protect themselves, and none of the NPCs use cover. But luckily Ron and Hermione can't die, so if they want to run headfirst into enemy spells, whatever floats your boat. There was one point in Godric's Hollow when Hermione started furiously shooting a wall because an enemy had spawned in and the AI was completely unaware that there was a house between it and the enemy. The killer is she was shooting at a Dementor, which last I checked was immune to the Stupefy spell she was using!
Brilliant!
The game clocks in at a piddly 4 hours, and it's still padded like crazy. There are 3 different levels where you follow a character, like Griphook or the Doe Patronus, through a few battlefields, you do something relevant to the plot, and then you're forced to go back through the exact same levels you just went through. At 3 points in between story missions, the game stops so you can do side quests, and you're forced to do all 3 of them before you're allowed to continue. Some of the environments are recycled from other levels, and all except one are just fighting the same damn enemies you fight for all the story missions, rescuing Muggleborns from Snatchers. There's a grand total of 2 character models for Snatchers, by the way. You'll always find yourself fighting legions of clones. Either that or the entire game is just you fighting 2 extremely persistent bad guys. The entire game reeks of laziness and padding. Between that, the worthless leveling system, the health potions you don't need, and 87.5% of the spells being completely worthless, this entire game feels like the dev team had no idea what kind of game they were even trying to make. The levels of the game that aren't boring-ass blow-up-everyone-in-sight missions are stealth levels where you make your way from objective to objective with Harry's invisibility cloak. If you touch anybody, the cloak flies off. You don't get an instant game over for getting spotted, otherwise the game would be incredibly frustrating, but the enemies immediately lose track of you if you throw the cloak back on, so screwing up is just a momentary inconvenience. The real frustrating part of the stealth levels is that there's a meter in the corner of the screen that drains as you walk, and it takes, 30 seconds for this thing to run empty, and the cloak wears off. So you have to periodically stop and sit on your butt for several seconds to let this stupid thing recharge. Isn't this cloak one of the Deathly Hallows, the cloak used by Death himself, and now it doesn't even work for a minute unless I'm standing perfectly still? I call shenanigans. Total honesty, these stealth sections are the best parts of the game because they actually require a fair amount of effort and thought on your part, but there are only 2 stealth levels in the entire game, and they're both near the start and one is a tutorial. It's further evidence that the developers didn't even know what they were trying to make here. Hell, you want to hear how confused this game is? One of the hints that will pop up on loading screens says that you can sneak up on enemies using the invisibility cloak. This is an outright lie because outside of the 2 stealth levels, enemies can somehow see you whether the ostensibly invisibility cloak is on or not. The game's own hints are wrong! At the end of the game, you visit Xenophilius Lovegood's house and encounter a group of Death Eaters and Snatchers. You have to survive for 3 minutes, which is easy as piss since you take damage so slowly, and there are health potions in the room if you suck. After that, you have to fight through a huge group of Snatchers. Now, having seen the movie and read the book, I know this is the point in the story where Harry and friends get caught by Snatchers and taken to Malfoy Manor, and no matter how many enemies I fight, they just keep coming. So right now, I'm thinking this is a supposed-to-lose Horde mode fight or something, but no. I spent 11 minutes fighting an endless wave of identical Death Eaters and Snatchers until I figured out you're just supposed to run to the end of the level. You can sit here fighting enemies all day. I'm pretty sure these enemies never stop respawning. I've heard that you actually have the option of running to the end of the level and ignoring enemies in every level of the game. I never tried it myself because it sounded like a good way to get killed, but you can literally just say screw it, ignore the enemies, and just run to the end of any level. And you're forced to do this in the second to last level. Game designers didn't give a shit, and neither should you. The final boss fight is a joke. You fight Bellatrix Lestrange and the Malfoys, and this boss fight is less than a minute long. You just mash B and everyone dies, just like every other fight in the game. Luckily for me, I had Ron as a meat shield. He ran in front of me, taking the bulk of the enemy's spells to the face, while I shot everyone else, and after a minute, everyone just fell and I got a pre-rendered cutscene. Thanks, pal! Seriously, there are only 3 boss fights in the game, the others being Dolores Umbridge and Voldemort's Horcrux, and the Horcrux, an inanimate object, is the only fight in the entire game that requires any effort, mostly because it can bullshit kill you in 1 hit. And the game is so aggressively boring that you're only ever going to play it once. The only replayability the game has, aside from playing a different difficulty level, are collectible Daily Prophet and Quibbler newspapers and Potter Watch radio broadcasts. But get this, the game has no level selection option. Once you beat the game, your only options are to replay the last level, Malfoy Manor, or start a new game and lose all of your collectibles. I wasn't going to go back for them anyway, but I have to start the entire game over again if I want to try and get all the collectibles? That's bullshit! Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1 is crap. It's a puddle of mismatched gameplay mechanics that has no reason to exist other than to milk a popular franchise one last time before the cow runs dry. The game is boring as hell. It's a shooter game where the game aims for you. All you do is mash the fire button for 4 hours, and that's the game. It's so easy that you barely even have to pay attention to it. It's not even a good story that's worth playing through because so much is cut out of the movie, which already had so much cut from the book, that there's no semblance of pacing. There's barely enough story to just let you know what you're doing in that one mission, and that's it. The movie is well paced with a climactic ending so that it feels as close to a complete movie as a part 1 can feel. The game just feels like it peters out and cuts off. It's not a satisfying experience in any way. There, horrible game is done for. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to...
I've got another one!